right, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Card Talk. I'm Ryan, joined as always by Tyler and Lou. And on today's episode, we're going to get into a whole bunch of different topics. But first and foremost, we're going to start with the PSA sale and what that means for the hobby. So Tyler, Lou, any initial thoughts following the announcement this morning that PSA was being sold for $700 million?
Exciting day, fun day for sure. I think it's interesting that Nat was at the forefront of that. It's kind of like I would say the face of the purchase, right? Behind that was Steve Cohen. I didn't know that Steve Cohen's group was one of the big investors as well. So that's interesting. I think it's like really early to say like what it functionally means. Like, I can't imagine there's going to be too many big changes, right? They're going to continue to operate their business and grow, and that's what they've been doing. That's not going to stop. So from a functional standpoint, I think it's too early to say, but it's definitely pretty cool that Nat's, involved in that.
Yeah, I think overall what we've seen definitely since March, start of kind of pandemic quarantine, if you want to call it that, but even going back further, just the overall awareness and action happening around sports cards and collectibles in general. I mean, in the art world, it's always been happening, but I think this proliferation of the alternative investment happening at every level is clearly obvious and clearly here to stay. I mean, Cohen just finalized the Mets, right? And in his kind of opening press conference, came across as a very forward-thinking, progressive cat, like entrepreneur. And like he was like, I bought this and I want to win and I'm going to invest. And then I'm like, tangentially, I'm like, oh, this is another move. He sees it's happening. He's in like the hobby and he thinks he can probably come in. Nat's a face of it. Nat's a weeds guy that's in the mix and can really speak to it. And then you've got a guy with capital and resources to progress things. My hope is that what Nat is able to do, and I speak about him like I know who he is, but I don't, is approach it a bit from a perspective of someone in the hobby that might submit to PSA or what have you. He can't, there's no, a lot of the questions is if it's not a public company, is there more risk? I mean, is he going to run the risk of discrediting his millions and millions and millions of dollars in investment by tarnishing any form of PSA? No, I don't believe so. What I hope that he might do is understand and approach things. RIP to Tony Shea, Zappos guy, but like the whole thing was like the customer. What I think PSA, SGC, these companies that have become so inundated with demand have forgot that to take care or treat or communicate to the consumers themselves, which are the lifeblood of the business. And I hope and think he might take some sort of approach. I could see some innovative approaches to maybe timelines. One thing I think about, I was reading Twitter, someone had an interesting take the other day of like where grading's gone completely bonkers maybe is some of the things that are sent in and graded and the way that might tie up timelines for other things. But then again, like who's to say what should be graded and not. So I just think that approach, that the combo of Cohen resources, progressive, entrepreneur that can really drive a business, and Nat, who I'm not saying can't do that because he's also a very, wealthy and successful individual. But I think if he takes a bit of approach of, hey, now that I'm in control of this, business, but I've seen it from the consumer side, can I get back to making this more of a bit of a relationship with our customers? Because I feel like some of that has gotten lost just in the complete inundation of their business and the demand and them trying to figure out how do we sustain this? How do we make sure it stays pristine, meaning that it's not watered down for what a PSA 10 might mean. So that's kind of my takes. I'm excited. I think you'll start to see some progressive nature. And we've talked on here ad nauseum in terms of like AI grading. Again, that might be someone that's been in those conversations and looking to bring it to that forefront there. So it's exciting in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely saw some of that getting circulated around social media about does this speed up, the AI grading and move to basically removing the human aspect of grading, right, and just letting basically a robot grade it. So,
and maybe there's another level. Maybe there's different cohorts of like human graded, and then they do AI. They introduce it side by side. It becomes like a different standard that you can play against, because that's possible too.
Yeah, and as someone, I don't, like you said, I don't know Nat either. But as someone that follows him and his content on Instagram, he seems like a super intelligent guy who I feel pretty confident in, that's gonna do some big things at PSA. So yeah, I think it's like Lou said, it's early, so it's really hard to give too much feedback on it, right? I'm not, I don't really know any crazy details on this yet, or what's gonna
You're
come
not
from
going
it.
on. You don't have an interview on CNBC Mad Money to talk about the investment.
Nah, not this
No.
week.
Interesting.
So yeah, it seems early, but definitely spark some chatter in the hobby.
It's fun to see. Like we're not sitting here talking about, a $72 purchase off eBay of a Zlatan Ibrahimovic raw sticker. We're talking about like a massive acquisition of a publicly traded company that is like the driving force behind the hobby right now. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, and we actually talked about this in shop the other day. Besides Panini, is PSA the second biggest biggest company in the hobby?
I think you could. I might say tops, because from a brand recognition standpoint, like without the cards, PSA isn't a factor.
Tops bigger than PSA.
Okay.
Yeah, but then I sit here and say, again, like I'm looking at
Importance
3 cards
is different,
graded.
though.
Yeah, so it depends, I think, on the factor of how you approach it and think about it. But yeah, interesting nonetheless. How'd Black Friday go at the shop?
Black Friday was good. Black Friday was busy. It was a long day, and lots happening for sure. We were up breaking pretty late, so yeah, it was a lot of familiar faces, and then some new people coming in that had just heard about us. So yeah, it was a great day, and definitely a sign of good things in the hobby for sure.
What was the most kind of asked about or sought after product?
Probably football hobby boxes. Basketball. We've said this on the show multiple times. Basketball's hot. Basketball runs the hobby for sure, but basketball's so expensive, right? Basketball 1920 wax is a lot, and 2020 football is more obtainable. So 2020 football is definitely a top seller at the moment.
It's one of the things we were going to get into and wanted to talk about here. There's a lot going on with the NFL. I mean, just before we started recording, they like rescheduled for the 4th time the Ravens Steelers game, which has been, all the rage and conversation. Prism obviously is about to come out. The early stuff starting to hit eBay. A lot has transpired. We talked about Drew Lock. I mean, the Broncos started a quarterback this week that on LinkedIn was like asking for medical sales jobs 2 days ago.
Literally selling medical equipment like 7 days ago.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Holy cow!
But some of the lessons that we've picked up over the past NFL season from a hobby and cards perspective that come to mind. We were going to jam on that a little bit, and we'd just love to hear from you guys. Again, it's crazy that 3 weeks from now, it's start of NBA's back, but we've had a lot of different conversations from early in the season, thinking position players would be big. Obviously the Tannehill banter that we've had. So just some of the things that we've learned or picked up on as this NFL season progressed. Lou, kick it off to you.
Yeah. Can you pull up those screenshots that we were talking about before? I think the number one thing that everyone learned was reaction, or I hope everyone learned, was reactionary buying when things come out, right? Like it was the combination, right? What happened with, I think one of the things that happened with football, which was good, was everything kind of like settled down a little bit. I think we were at like a major fever pitch as basketball was happening in the bubble and football was getting ready to start, where people were just like, they needed everything at every moment. And I was the same way. So when Mosaic came out, NFL Mosaic. We talked about how that was going to be a big deal because they put that out first. We had differing thoughts on the staying power of that product. And then I think one of the things was like the Chiefs game happened. Clyde Edwards-Helaire popped off in that first game, and we're going to pull up the screenshots here, but his silver NFL debut was selling for $200 on eBay, and that card is now like $4. Let me get the exact screenshots here, but it was insane to think about in hindsight. So here you go. Here's an example. It was $202 on September 16th for a silver prism refractor, Mosaic on September 16th. On November 29th, that card sold for $13.
The same exact card.
Same exact card. They think that was a product of how hyped up everyone was for Mosaic, for the NFL, for cards in general. And I think that's a very important lesson to think about for a multitude of reasons, right? Like, number one, running backs, probably not the best investment in hindsight. Number two, Mosaic, probably not the best investment in hindsight. Number three, the product had come out like 4 days earlier and people were just fired up and wanted to buy everything.
Yeah. Supply and demand, people are so big on that early on. But like, if you wait a week to acquire the same card, or you wait 2 weeks to acquire the same card, assuming it's not the 1 of 1 or out of 5 you may not get later, there's a lot of Mosaic, right? There's going to be plenty to go around. So yeah, that's a great take out of the Lou. And we talked about this before on Donruss, Lou, right? Where Clyde Edwards-Helaire was $43. He had one good game. His only rookie card in a Chiefs uniform was a Donruss rookie. He has a great game. It's $43. And we talked about this where we said Barkley's $3, McCaffrey's $3, Clyde Edwards-Helaire's $43. I'm willing to wager. Exactly. It doesn't add up. I'm willing to wager a year from now that's not the same thing. Ty, which
I think my takeaway around is just how honestly I think how different the NFL is from the NBA, and you can't apply similar principles to it. Meaning, just obviously injuries happen in both sports, but for one, position players, whether you call it a running back, Saquon Barkley and Zion, right? Take those two kind of almost for example. Like, the NFL is such a win now league, or we have to try something else, I feel like. And between TV and at all costs, like the money, the NBA is huge. But I guess what I'm trying to say is even more, it's harder to prospect in NFL because it's quarterback. I think prospecting as position players can be tough. I mean, DK Metcalf, one of the hottest that's coming out right now. Like, even his market for cards is not as crazy as, say, Ja and Zion. What?
DK Metcalf stuff is through the roof. The roof. I mean, I sold like patch autos from like Select for $300. That's a lot for a wide receiver. I mean, you can buy Calvin Johnson rookie patch autos for less than $300.
Great point. Like, I just think that a lot of those guys can come and go more. I think 100%. You're going to see a lot more like DK Metcalf, for all that he is. There's sometimes flash in the pans, and the relevancy of guys can come and go quickly. Burrow might not play for another 18 months. What does that mean? Like, Herbert's hot now. Sam was a huge prospect. Now he's about to be on his second team. I just worry that the people try and take the same principles and apply them, and that turns into paying $200 because you think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is about to be the next biggest thing in the world, and then realize that he's just another piece.
And if the thing about basketball is basketball plays 3 games a week, 4 games a week. You see Clyde Edwards-Helaire 16 games, 18 games? Like, you play once a week. One time a week.
And he kind of looks like most other people out. Like, he has a helmet on. There's 11 people on your team, 22 on the field. not 10. So like the number one thing I've learned is they're vastly different in the marketability of players, how players' careers develop, how they play out, and you need to approach it that way. You can't apply the sim principles, is what I would say.
Yep. Yeah, there were two things that really stood out to me when I was reviewing this. Plays off both of your guys's, but the first one to me is no matter what we said in the offseason, talking about skill positions or anything else, quarterbacks still run the card market for football. For sure, 100%. Great take out of Lou last week, and I've been thinking about it a lot after I watched him this week because I think it's so true. Like Mahomes gets the LeBron treatment now. What he does is not normal, and he's about as consistent as it gets. And every single week, he's just incredible. I mean, him and Tyreek for what, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. I mean, Mahomes is just out of this world. So to me, it's still quarterbacks run the market. I mean, Metcalf's good. Claypool, right? If you bought in him cheap, he looks decent, right? Like Justin Jefferson, there are wide receivers that are good, running backs are good, and have potential to be great. Quarterbacks are still what people want.
Yeah. I mean, for even on the Claypool thing, like, you might correct me. You're not hearing much about Juju.
It's quiet for Juju.
It's quiet for Juju, and he was like huge. It's hard as a position player in that league to carry sustained juice.
I agree.
And I think
that's why some of these guys are underappreciated.
Yeah.
The DeAndre Hopkins, the Julio Jones.
Yeah.
Like those guys are doing it year in and year out. But the other thing I took out of this, and I wrote down was, especially in football, I mean, this goes in cards in general, but if you're buying these guys as an investment, again, it's different if this is a collecting for you, but if it's investing, the lack of control that you have in a player's outcome is just out of this world. And the same thing with like how I honestly think how much lack of control the player has, right? So like injuries, a bad coach, a terrible offensive line. Like I look at this season in a whole and I'm thinking Joe Burrow's offensive line was absolutely atrocious. Like Sam Darnold has a terrible coach. Look what Ryan Tannehill had in Miami versus Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. So I think Darnold at some point will do something. Adam Gase, right? I think there's a lot of outside of your control on that. And I think that's definitely the risk factor in cards and in investing, especially with football is, Joe Burrow looked awesome. He looked really good there. He has all the potential in the world. Can't do anything if you can't protect him. And, if the team stinks or other things like that. So the lack of control.
And I think that, again, like that, those aren't the things I was thinking about when I started getting into football card stuff. Whereas the NBA is like, yo, if this dude is a primetime Trae Young, right? Like great players in the NBA can be great on bad teams. They can jump off the screen and make people like build around them. You can put a great wide receiver, you take DeAndre Hopkins and put him on a bottom of the barrel team. Like it's only going to help so much.
Yep. It matters who's throwing you the ball.
I would also say on the other side of that coin, I think you might be able to start applying that to basketball heading into the season. I don't think we should expect the same insanity with basketball that we saw with the bubble. I just don't think that's realistic to expect. And this, in the same way you said to yourself, oh wait, like wide receivers aren't that popping. The rookie or second year dude who's the 7th guy off the bench, it might not be the hottest option.
You talking about
and centers still might not sell.
I'm talking about someone like a Tyler Hero, 100%.
And centers might not
actually.
Centers might not still be super popular.
Yeah, like Ayton.
Yeah, we talked about that before with Buster, right? Like everyone's like, "Oh man, DeAndre Ayton good." Like centers historically don't sell, so I'm not saying they can. It's just typically.
And you know what I think this is getting at is from a long-term buy and hold approach, which I think is 70% of the people that are likely engaging newer and or our audience. Again, before we started recording, I said one of the hardest things to do when I talked about investors is we talked about beginners, but like is the sale. I think a lot of what we're talking about can not apply to people that are day in and day out buying and selling and can transact on quicker, smaller windows. But I think if you're thinking about like buy a card at the beginning of the season and sell it at the end, like that is where you can get caught on some of these things we're talking about. In hype, if you knew the Chris Paul thing was happening, or like you buy and sell in quick windows, or he has a good first week and you're willing to sell, great. There's probably a lot of people that made good money on Clyde Edwards-Helaire if they were in the buying and selling business. Mm-hmm. Not if they're buying Clyde because they think he might be a Hall of Famer.
And I think,
like you were saying, which is what I think the vast majority of people are doing, whether they're honest with themselves about that or not.
Yeah. Because it's much easier to purchase than it is to sell. Mm-hmm. It's only one decision versus two.
Perfect. Set it up perfect, Tyler. Much easier to purchase than sell. And this is where I think we talked about this with basketball, and I think this is a little nugget we should sneak in here, that if you're paying attention to the NFL and you're invested in the NFL and you bought things to sell at the end of the season, pay attention. The end of the season is coming quicker than you might expect, right? We're 6 weeks away? 7 weeks away from a guy that's not going to be in the postseason, sitting on the couch watching the postseason with you and I, right? So if you're like, hey, I'm all in on this guy, he's going to be great. Well, you're 7 weeks away from his prices being down until the start of next season. Are you willing to hold those until next season comes, or is now the time to move them? Not saying there's a right or wrong answer, but just something to keep in mind that the season end is coming. If you're preparing to sell, now might be the time to start having those conversations with yourself about what you're playing for the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Will Fuller just got suspended 6 games for a PED violation.
That's the second time, isn't it?
Is it?
I thought he's already been suspended before.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just quick wrapping up NFL. I think something we talked about last week, and we'll talk about it as the product releases, and I'm sure we'll have more thoughts on it, but just early takeaways from eBay. I just wanted to point out real quick, like me and Tyler were looking yesterday. We looked again just now before we started, but Burrow Prisms are doing like around 140-ish. Herbert's doing around 300-ish. Jalen Hurts is doing 100 something.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah. So again, and now take that how you will, right? Like, are you in the business of buying something right now and sitting on it? Probably wouldn't recommend spending $300 on a Justin Herbert raw right now. Just wouldn't do it.
Like, that seems, again, let's just real quick. 2 weeks from now, we're recording an episode. Prism's been out for a week and a half at that point. Mm-hmm. What in your mind, Lou, where Justin Herbert Prism base gonna be?
180.
That seems high to me.
In 2 weeks now, there's always a little high. There's a little, yeah. It's a 45% drop off in 2 weeks. That's pretty.
I would have said $60.
No,
I think it stays higher than you think, Rye, until graded stuff starts coming back, because then that's where
we're 4 or 5 months away at best from that right now.
When people don't want to pay the typical multiple, and there's volume, I think that's when it breaks.
Yeah, I think
that's what happened with Mbappe. That's what happened with Mbappe in a major way.
The time to buy these cards is going to be February, March, April. That's the time to buy these cards.
Start of the offseason.
I wanted to, switching gears here a little bit, I came across this Twitter thread that I thought would be fun to highlight. And I can actually just bring it up on, I can share my screen real quick. Bowman 1951.
Great Twitter account. Highly recommend. Just as a separate thing.
Love it. Fun stat of the day. PSA is approaching 500,000 of all NBA cards graded for this past year's products. Now at 462,000. For those wondering, 54% of all cards submitted have gemmed. One of the toughest sets have been Haynes Michael Jordan cards at just 23% gem rate. Is that a set that came out this past year?
It was in Hanes underwear. You could get there was like one in there was like 5 Jordan autographs, and you haven't seen these things on Facebook with like dudes with like 40 boxes or 40 bags of like Hanes briefs.
That's fire. That's
crazy.
Fire. Not many out there, 40, but the Chronicles Flux Autos gem at almost 80%. They're one of the easiest I've found. There are almost 23,000 NBA hoops cards from 1920 graded, and 76.5% are John Zion. Someone is going to have a nice 6-figure payday that gets the first Gem 10 white sparkle of either Zion or Ja. The real meat obviously comes from the Prism set, where 40% of all NBA cards graded originate from in the 1920 year. Zion is gemming at 54% with 25,000 cards submitted. Ja at 56% with 20,000 graded. 10% of all this past year's basketball cards PSA graded are Ja, Zion, Prism.
Wow, that's a lot.
So something they're talking about here is the gem rate. We haven't done a super deep dive on that, but we've mentioned it casually. Gem rate is something that if you're grading and you're a grader and it's something you pay attention to, you can make some real margins if you know what you're doing. Like I know the example that always comes to mind, and I talked about this before as well, but like Lamar Jackson prisms are like incredibly difficult to gem.
Mm-hmm.
So people submit those, and if you get back a 10 on a Lamar Prism 2018, it's like a huge deal because it makes no sense. So like the gem rate is something, if you're like this person and look into these things, is you can learn a lot about the marketplace and where opportunities lie if you do the research there.
I just got back a 500 card submission and had 67.2% gem. So
Sheesh.
Just to give somebody an idea of like what it looks
like.
like.
You're right. For your like to give the audience context, what does the gem rate typically look like for you on a submission of call it 100%, 100 cards?
65 to 75.
65 to 75%.
Yeah, 50. Yeah, 65 is probably average. 75 is good. 55 is bad.
And you also know what you're doing, so you have probably a higher hit rate.
There's a lot more review and more time and prep put into when I sub cards, but it's just 65 is ideal. I think you're telling me if I submit 10 cards and
six of them are 10s, that's pretty good.
6 of them are 10 or 7 of them are 10s on a certain day.
Yeah,
I would take those odds all day.
And I think as the grading process and that gets more commoditized and people get better at that whole process, that I think that'll be a W for everyone. And what does that mean exactly? Like, should it really be a 65% gem rate? I don't know, but I guess just something to think about. And then when you start to see cards that are 30, 25, even 40% gem rate, you're like, all right, cool. I gotta give this one an extra look because I don't know what what good my odds are of gemming this card before I submit it.
And I think something to point out there in that thread with the Bowman page Tyler just pulled up is he mentioned, like, I think those are great statistics where I think oftentimes it's underlooked, like how many of these cards are really 10s. Like he said, no Zion or Jaws from White Sparkle had gotten 10s from Prism, and there wasn't a 9 for Zion. Mm-hmm. Like I think some of, like, not Zion or Jaw per se, but I think there are sets and specifics that are like underappreciated in the hobby. For the longest time it was select court sides, right? Like those were nothing. I remember buying, Luka courtside PSA 10 base for like $200, and a silver now is what, 18 grand? Like eventually that pop control or the population report that will that's going to play a factor, I think, down the road. So yeah, super great statistics. I'm definitely going to follow that page. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's episode with the latest launches or upcoming releases for this week. It's definitely a big release week, obviously headlined by Prism Football. That's going to come out Friday. Prism No Huddle Football actually came out today, where it's Monday when we're recording this. So that came out today. Rookies and Stars Football released today. And then you've got later in the week, you'll have Upper Deck Chronology Hockey, Topps Garbage Pale Kids Chrome, Prism Draft Picks Collegiate Baseball, Topps Allen and Gator Chrome Baseball, and Panini Flawless Baseball. So a lot of baseball this week and a couple different football products, followed by a hockey product as well. So
Speaking of baseball, I was telling you guys before, I had a lot of action on my Juan Soto tops. I had some extra tops update Sotos. I saw a bunch of action on them this weekend, so I don't know why that happened. But baseball is still cool, no matter what you guys say. That's it.
do you think it makes like Ty Lue, thoughts on baseball releasing when baseball's not even completely relevant at all? Does that hurt a product value?
No, because they still they're putting out basketball products right now. It's the same thing. It's just baseball's not as popular, so you're just saying that.
I don't think Lou's wrong. I think the people that are going to buy baseball are going to buy baseball. Do you do much, like, is there interest on the breaker side of things for any of this baseball stuff?
A lot. I mean, new product breaks pretty much regardless, right? I mean, there's enough people in the hobby now that
the crossover between that and then people that care about baseball, I think it's more weird that Prism football is coming out right now, but then again, like, we're in a weird year, and I say that meaning players are reporting to NBA camp like this week.
Yeah, and what's crazy is December 4th last year, December 3rd last year was a Friday. I was in Boston for the Patriots Chiefs game that weekend, and that was the day Prism basketball came out. Here we are a year later, and we won't have flawless basketball 1920 for Zion a year after Prism came out.
It's interesting.
And again, it's not Panini's fault. It's obviously COVID. It just tells you like how crazy this year's been. With a whole year later, we're still getting products. Now, a lot of these products would have come out during the summer when COVID. But obviously COVID threw things for a loop. But kind of been a crazy year for sure, considering we're 3 days away from a year ago Prism basketball came out.
Yeah,
for sure.
Prism retail on release day, $135 a box. It's over
Prism
$1,000
retail. I might have to run to Target and see what's going on, because I want to rip it. I really want to rip Prism football. Like
I ripped a blaster, a cello, and a hanger box.
I ripped some Premier League Prism this weekend, and it was
a dud.
Amazing, to say the least. There wasn't much. It was a fairly sizable dud.
The best.
It was an L, kind of right in my mouth, but I had a fucking blast.
Yeah, opening cards is really fun.
And when I bought that case, I bought an entire case of it. I think I bought it for like $1,200 or $1,300, right around there. They do $650 a box now. So that's cool.
I remember buying English Premier League first off the line for nothing because nobody wanted soccer cards.
Yep.
I still got 3 of those boxes left.
You want to sell one to me?
Maybe one of these days.
It'll be a Christmas present.
There we go. Love it. All right, that's all we got for now, guys.